I guess we could call this a meeting of the minds or a meeting of the Moguls. This year, 2026, is a big anniversary year for the ranch. It's 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you bought it. 10 years ago, you bought it. Have you guys spoken to each other since that exchange was made?
So we've actually bought the farm. Is that what you're trying to tell us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to each other since then?
So we had, I'll take that first. We had some great dialogue. I had the privilege of flying down here to Las Vegas to meet with Robert and to see his incredible aerospace facility out in North Las Vegas and have the discussion around the potential acquisition of the ranch. We continued that dialogue, turned it over to our attorneys, and ended up concluding that. And I think within a year or two, we hosted a gathering in Salt Lake City with many of the former members of the NIDS and BASS team, as well as my team of scientists and engineers, and really used that as a foundation to kick off our stewardship and investigation of Skinwalker Ranch with the Bigelow team's advice and guidance. But since that time, we've both been crazy busy going different directions, and this is without question, George, I think a most historic moment for these topics. Not just a discussion about Skinwalker Ranch and the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on the planet, but I think this is historic in that we're touching on topics that I believe people should be paying more attention to than ever.
I agree. Yeah. So last night we were deep diving into consciousness.
Well, we're gonna go there. We're gonna, I think, maybe break some news today about future of the ranch and the investigations of this nature. But I want to review some of what the water that's gone under the paranormal bridge, so to speak. And 30 years ago, the scientific investigation began. It is the most intensely studied paranormal UFO hotspot in the world because the investigation's been ongoing. But I'm wondering if we can get into, sort of what we learned. Robert, when you bought the property in 1996, did you have a game plan? I mean, it wasn't exactly a blueprint for studying a place like that, but you go there because it had a lot of UFO activity in the Uinta Basin and on the ranch and some mutilations. You didn't know all the other stuff that was going on there, though, did you?
We had operated that ranch prior to the contract with DIA for quite a few years, so we knew back in, I think we contracted for that ranch with Terry Sherman in 95, was it?
96.
About 95. The DIA contract started in September of 2008. So we already had a history. And it wasn't just focused on what was happening on that ranch. It was other ranches, sister ranches, contiguous to it and outside of that for some distance. And we particularly established a strong rapport with BIA and the Deputy Sheriff's Department. And we gained enormous information by what they saw, what they chased, what happened in their homes, what happened in broad daylight in their front yards. When I never will forget a story by one BIA fellow, and he said that his wife was hysterical. She was out in the yard with her little boy, and this thing jumped over this alien creature, jumped over a cyclone fence like it was nothing, way over it, and got jumped on top of the roof of their house, as I recall, and she went hysterical, and then it leaped enormous distances, like maybe 50 feet at a time, and disappeared. So her husband drove to the house very quickly and checked everything out and so forth. But that anomalous kind of story and creature, which is unbelievable, was part of the the data that we had and the number of testimonies, reliable witnesses that we had, in addition to the sheriff people and the VIA people themselves, not just their family members. So we got into some really interesting things that were amazing. And I think you guys covered a couple of the stories in the Skinwalker, where the motel, the creature that was trying to climb over a wall, a pony wall, and the dog was barking in an A-frame office at the motel, and there was a security guard there, and he walked down and called for assistance, and as the sheriff people got there, then they wound up chasing this thing, right? And they and it was going so fast they had a hard time keeping up with it before it dove into a bunch of houses on the res. Isn't that the story? I believe it was.
When you're first there, you fly down to see the rancher. You meet with him. He tells you some of what had been going on there. Then you buy the property, and your guys go in, and you start learning all this strange range of extraordinary events. You didn't know all that stuff was happening when you bought the place, right?
No, because the volume of stories and personal encounters were far greater than the initial contact would tell you with somebody, as an owner. And we learned more and more on our own. And then we hired him as a manager for a year and a half or 2 years. He was the manager there. So he was the guy that already had the history. When we started the AAWSAP program, then it became much more elevated with far more staff, up to 50 people is what we had. But we encountered, people went to Brazil and outside of the United States and other places in South America. And so we were looking at other hotspots around the United States besides Skinwalker. We found a number of other locations that were very active also.
In 96, in this building, the NIDS Science Advisory Board has its first meeting. And then a couple months later, you buy the ranch. But nobody had a game plan. You didn't know exactly the vast range of different experiences and phenomena that were there, just that it was a UFO hotspot and some mutilations. But there's no blueprint for what you're going to do. Did you know what the approach was going to be when you went in?
You're winging it for a particular site. You know what if you research a lot about the phenomena and the subject matter, you're aware of all of the engagements nationwide and maybe globally. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. So it's not as though you're going in blind, totally blind, but you don't know obviously what a single location is going to produce. You don't realize that you just walked into another dimensional area that is active and vibrant and is really dynamic in the diversity of activities that are going to be exhibited to you or that are going to involve you. And they're not always, there's no warning for what most of this happens. There's no, and a lot of things aren't repeated the same way twice. They're unique. A lot of them are unique. The draining of the batteries, and that happens. There are things like that are regular, but other more dynamic things are kind of customed, depending upon really what you're doing. And some version of interfering with what you're doing is going to occur. And then it has, over the years, the interference has become much more serious as time gone by. There's tremendous liability concerns, and it's become something that the risk of a living laboratory has become a far than any kind of normal laboratory that ever exists. It's the most unique kind of laboratory that ever exists in any kind of building anywhere on the planet. Even though we've had materializations of things in our aerospace plant, it doesn't hold a candle to the Skinwalker Ranch.
We'll get into some of that and into your decision to sell the property. Brandon, you didn't believe any of this stuff. Colin Kelleher and I wrote a book in 2005. I recall the reaction from a lot of the public as we made it up, or Robert Bigelow made it up because he wanted to build a paranormal hotel on there and make a bunch of money, which was, of course, ridiculous and never an idea.
Right.
You had an idea when you bought it. You didn't believe it. You were a skeptic, and you thought, gosh, this is a really beautiful ranch. Maybe a great place for Boy Scouts, right?
Exactly. At the time, I was on the board of the National Parks Council of the Boy Scouts of America and was an Eagle Scout. And I saw this property as a beautiful opportunity and location for the scouting program and to inspire the next generations. But I wanted to satisfy my curiosity and to be able to, through the scientific method and through third-party experts, confirm that there really wasn't anything unusual happening on Skinwalker Ranch. And so I did indeed buy it as a skeptic with that in mind. And for the first 6 months, with the exception of some really strange images that were captured by my drone surveyor and security, which I thought could just as well be Lockheed Skunk Works or some other classified program testing within the airspace, I really wasn't convinced that there was anything truly unusual happening on the property. Every time I visited on a monthly basis, those first 6 months, it was a peaceful, pristine, very diverse landscape, and I saw it as potentially a scouting retreat.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine having your paranormal hotel and letting people come in and you having Boy Scout camps there?
Yeah, in retrospect, it's hilarious. It's pretty humorous to think that that's where my mindset was. But I had grown quite skeptical of these topics, even matters of faith. And I felt like everything could be explained by critical thinking and scientific rigor and applying the scientific method. And I was wrong. I ultimately not only moved from being a skeptic to an experiencer, but have now amassed a data set that is, it's compelling. There is nothing like it on the planet. And I would say, if not for the courage and the foundational efforts of Robert Bigelow and his team, we wouldn't be where we're at today. And I think our understanding of our place in the universe, we'd be in a much different position.
Robert had sent me a text a couple of days ago and said, "You think Brandon Fugal would come on our podcast?" I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to that." I text Brandon. He's available 5 minutes later for a phone call and agrees, I'm ready to jump on the plane and come on down here any point. I would imagine, even though you guys haven't talked a lot in the years since the property was sold, there's some mutual respect there because you both view it as you're stewards of that property. You're not owning it. You're not exploiting it. You're stewards and kind of keeping an eye on it and keeping it out of harming other people.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and Robert has a legacy. This is part of his extraordinary legacy, and we've tried to do our best through our stewardship to carry that forward and conduct a scientific investigation that will hopefully yield insights and inform the public relative to the reality of these things that were talked about in your book decades ago. And so to sit here today, I mean, this is a historic moment. It's often said we stand on the shoulders of giants. I don't know any private individual on the planet that has had more courage and has invested more in his tenure than Robert Bigelow. And so to have the opportunity to come together in your headquarters and to be able to have a collaborative discussion and compare notes after a decade of stewardship.
Well, the feeling is mutual because what Brandon has undertaken is extraordinary exposure to the general public that we never did. And so the general public has been elevated in their knowledge, thanks to him and the entire show, about things that go bump in the night, and about consciousness and things that are abnormal. So where else on TV are you going to find that kind of information? So he's done all that on his own.
When NIDS was first there, it's like the cone of silence drops over the ranch. There were a couple of newspaper stories that were out, and I think maybe one or two of them had caught your attention and before you bought the property. But when you send your guys on there and they start seeing this stuff for themselves, holy cow, this is true. You kept it quiet. A, for the integrity of what the investigation was, and B, you didn't want to attract a lot of attention.
Right.
And people
Right.
be overrun with it.
Right.
I know that there has been criticism. Brandon, when I first met some of your team members before the show was on the air, they said, well, Bigelow, he won't share any of the data. And I don't know what the data would be, because nothing ever replicates, nothing ever duplicates the same way. You have a ton of experiences, and both of you, your approach has been poke the bear and see what happens. But what you couldn't have published a scientific paper if you wanted to, right, back then?
We weren't trying to stimulate the performances exactly. We were kind of, if there were cattle mutilation, I bought Terry Sherman's group of cows, and the poor things were bait for cattle mutilation. So we could do a necropsy on the animal and understand and maybe somehow learn a lot more about how these occur, because they have happened in every single state in the United States, thousands of these cases. They're the most successful crime that has ever happened. So we did things like that. We set up games in the old homesteads to be acted on. So we did those kinds of things to see. I'm not saying to try to establish a relationship exactly, but to try to get a feel for something that we could engage and get a response back in some kind of way. And the most serious thing would be the mutilation of an animal. That was the most serious thing. And so we had our security people there to keep people out, and that was kind of our thinking.
You had mutilations of cows. You had mutilations of you had dogs that were vaporized when the rancher was there.
Terry did.
Terry did.
Yeah.
There were cats that were mutilated. There were horses that were attacked. There were a lot of animals that were hurt in those days, right?
There were. Then there were also animals that were just
Disappeared.
put into panic because of the balls of light. The balls that were red, as I recall, caused a mental disturbance in the animals, horses or cows, and put them into a panic. And I think there was a report where one of those was witnessed over someone's head. It might have been Terry that witnessed it, or maybe one of our people did. And the person, the human, was unaware that the ball was over his head. Terry had an encounter with a teal-colored, a ball, a turquoise-colored ball that was transparent, and inside was a kind of a liquefied energy form that was causing bolts of light flashing off inside the ball. There was a tremendous amount of energy in that. But it was communicating to his consciousness, and it was telling him, if you take another step further, and he was about 12 feet away, you're going to die. And he was so convinced, he backed off immediately. And we confirmed that with another person on another ranch contiguous to the west of the Skinwalker, and the same thing encountered when the ball was going up a hill, and the person was following it. Before they got to the top of the hill, the ball stopped and convinced the person they were going to die if they kept following it. So that kind of interaction, consciousness interaction, besides the physicality of being able to have locomotion that can dance around branches of trees and not hit a single one through a whole group of trees, is very interesting.
You know, the only thing consistent about the ranch is that it's always inconsistent, that whatever has happened before it changes. You know, the kinds of things that were happening during the NIDS era and during AAWSAP, creatures, trickster stuff, mutilations of all kinds of animals. You had some of that, but it's not the same. You don't see a lot of creatures there anymore, do you?
It's transient. I mean, we've had some disturbing animal deaths. We've had some injuries that have been caught on camera, sometimes in tandem with the experimental activities that are occurring on the ranch. One of the most prominent episodes that occurred on camera when we brought the television docuseries effort onto the property was this perfectly healthy calf that was found dead just south of Homestead 1, or the ranch house. And immediately as the men went to go investigate it on camera, not only were the tri-field meters going crazy with elevated microwave, gamma radiation, other readings that were showing up that were really strange, but the smartphones were malfunctioning. You had one individual, Thomas Winterton, who had a Samsung device, and you had Caleb Bench, who is, one of our security professionals, who is also active law enforcement. He is working with the sheriff's office at the same time as providing security services at the ranch. Both of these individuals had their phones simultaneously being manipulated before their very eyes in tandem with investigating this suspicious death of this perfectly healthy calf. And upon pulling up the surveillance footage of that area of the ranch to find out what happened, was there something that killed it? Was there a perpetrator involved? Exactly what time did that animal go down? Interestingly, right around the time that the animal went down, there was captured an object, a UFO, right above the tree line, simultaneous with that event. And that caused us to take a step back and view the events that were unfolding on the ranch quite differently. I mean, this was serious. And to see data, to see the equipment malfunction, the elevated readings that were coming off of the instruments, and also to see something unidentified that entered the space upon review of the surveillance footage, that changed the game significantly, and it caused us to double down on trying to understand the nature of what is happening. Because I think it as much as it's unpredictable, the one thing that we have been able to see emerge as far as patterns in the data are electromagnetic anomalies, rapid battery depletion, acute medical episodes, corresponding many times with unidentified aerial phenomena. They say that correlation does not mean causation. You always have to keep that in mind. But when you have enough correlations and data points, it forms a pattern of behavior and activity that is undeniable.
Has anybody able to reverse engineer how you would do the stuff that is done to equipment at the ranch? Like what system drains batteries just out of nowhere? What system knocks out cameras and affects phones? And how wouldn't it be handy to have a device that would do that all the time? But it's happened since the beginning, right?
To manipulate closed systems?
Yeah.
Instantaneously. I mean, we're talking about completely dismantling or reprogramming closed systems on that property.
How do you shut down 10 out of 10 missiles in a nuclear pod? Each individual one is each missile is individually wired and programmed, and all the programs are changed so that you can't launch, or you get within one step of launching in the case of the Russian ones. So you're asking a question that is beyond. It's as far beyond us as trying to understand them, the others, and their machines and how they work.
Robert's identifying something very interesting, and that is the fact that what has been reported on military installations that has national security implications has also been documented on Skinwalker Ranch in a private sector setting. I think that's interesting.
You know, the previous owners, the Myers, who had the property for a long time, they say nothing ever happened while they were there, nothing. But as they passed the property along, as I recall from our book, they put sort of a condition on the deed that you can't do any digging without letting us know in advance to the new owner.
Well, you're wrong, George. I'm going to cut you off.
Okay.
Their heir, Garth Myers, who sold the property to the Shermans, claimed that there was no activity.
Right.
When confronted by Dr. Frank Salisbury and others that were following up on the investigation. When it comes to Kenneth and Edith Myers and the documentary history, we have retired law enforcement that has gone on record with the fact that Kenneth and Edith Myers called on law enforcement on a regular basis to respond to activity, cattle mutilation activity, high strangeness, and even UFO activity on Skinwalker Ranch going back decades prior to their death and it being passed from Garth Myers to the Shermans. And, you know, I have some documentation showing that in an exchange between Gwen Sherman and Garth Myers shortly after their acquisition and them being terrorized, when she confronted Garth and said, "Why didn't you tell us about this?" Garth Myers apparently responded saying, "I thought it would leave you alone." I've seen this documented.
So I was told by Terry, and I think we later confirmed it, that there was no restrictive covenant on the land, essentially, and Terry didn't put it that way.
Okay.
Terry just said he had an agreement with Myers that he would not do any excavation without Myers being there. And there was a time when Terry wanted to lay down a pipe, and Myers came out to check it. I think it was Myers that did. Somebody came out to verify where he was going and gave approval. But it wasn't a restrictive covenant that ran with the deed, ran with the land.
Okay.
It was an advisory.
I see.
And I was told that was a cautionary aspect associated with the history of the ranch. Didn't think anything of it until we started disturbing the earth. And when Thomas Winterton, my superintendent and ranch manager, who's been involved since April of 2016, since the month I purchased the property, when he started to do work to improve the ranch, and to move the earth, to create roadways and to make certain improvements, he ended up in the hospital and almost died. And he was warned. He was warned telepathically to cease his activity or else, and he ignored it and proceeded and ended up in the hospital, almost lost his life. The doctors still to this day can't explain what exactly happened to him other than the back of his skull was irradiated and his scalp separated from his skull, and it was a really disturbing acute medical episode that now combined with a library of other episodes that have occurred. I think we talked about this last night, Robert. It's escalated. The activity on the ranch and the danger, the harm associated with conducting aggressive experimental activity it's sobering.
And George, you were there last night as a witness to all of our conversation.
There's a reason why I have everyone sign a liability waiver and acknowledge the risks associated with entering the property. And it's not just theatrical. It's not just for drama. It's dead serious.
Absolutely.
There were risks to your employees. Eventually, we're going to jump into hitchhikers, I guess, but the idea of attachments, it's been associated with ghost research for a long time, poltergeist kind of thing. I doubt that was on your mind when you bought the ranch, but it started happening, right? I don't know at what point it started happening, but there's some very dramatic things to your staff, and we can come back to some of what's happened while your stewardship is underway, that had to affect whether you wanted to hang on to it or not, I would think.
Well, we had, I mentioned in one of the discussions, our episodes, that we had events happen to two of our security people. And two of those events were in Las Vegas, and because of the hitchhiker effect. And one was on the ranch. We did get into the levels of harmful interaction that Brandon et al. Have suffered. We didn't get into that kind of level. I was with that prohibition or that agreement with Terry and Myers about not digging on the ranch. My thoughts went to more nefarious kinds of things to do with humans, as to why are you so fussy about digging anywhere? Is there graves that we don't know about? And graves of who? We didn't know of any Indian burial grounds there at all. So is it something that the white man has done? Who is possibly buried there? So my thoughts didn't go to ET. It first went to human beings as to nefarious activities that they may have been involved in. And I was very curious about that Terry would receive a prohibition of digging anywhere without personally somebody being there to watch.
Like maybe there's murder victims buried there, or aborted fetuses, or some kind of waste material, some horrible waste material.
You've got
right?
it. Yes, absolutely.
Did you do experiments that in digging in the ground to purposely stir something up and see what happens?
I briefly did, and then I stopped because I just didn't feel right about it. I took a caterpillar I had from another ranch, and we trucked it down there, and we did some excavation with that. And then we didn't find anything. We only went down maybe 4 feet in an area, and then we backfilled it all in, and we didn't find anything. And I thought, well, a 480-acre ranch is what we were told it was. I don't know, 500 foot. I don't know what the hell the size is.
Well, I think
It's
Brandon's
512, and part of that is because we control the road. The private road that leads into the ranch is actually owned by Adamantium Real Estate, by the entity. And one of the things that we did right off the bat within the first few months of my stewardship was to formalize the boundary lines of the property and to be able to fully secure. Now that effort escalated significantly after I had my close encounter experience. After October 14th of 2016, we proceeded aggressively to address how to install the right security measures, a full military-grade gated entrance, a guard shack, a gatehouse there at the entrance to check people in as a formal checkpoint, and then started adding surveillance assets encompassing the entire ranch to be able to document the nature of the activity and also be able to keep people out of harm's way, and also keep people from potentially compromising the sensitivity of a very real scientific investigation.
Right.
It was ongoing. That's one thing that has been an ongoing surprise, is how much visitor activity impacts the level of interaction with the phenomena. Certain visitors, depending on what they bring as far as intent to the property, will trigger sometimes to very negative results.
There was a temptation I had one time to go ahead and dig more. But when you're dealing with that size of a piece of ground, 500 plus acres, where do you start? Where are you going to end?
Yeah.
Because that's huge, right? So the odds are you're just not going to point to some area and dig and come up with things.
Did you ever have a reaction to digging in the ground on purpose? I mean,
No,
no.
no, I didn't. And it was so brief. And what we did was, I think we did it in one day. We just excavated, used the cat, dug up quite an area that maybe was, a quarter of the size of a football field. And then back, we put all the material back and into the ground and drove over it and compacted it. But I had hired a world-class remote viewer named Joe McMonagle on 2 occasions to remote view the ranch. And his results were tempting for me to do certain things to explore, but I never did them.
You identified places where hey, you should look here or something bad?
It was a blinded study. I knew about it, so it wasn't double blind, but he was blinded. So he had a longitude, latitude instructions in a sealed envelope that he couldn't open. But the sealed envelope was on the desk, and that's all he had to go on. And he drew and described, he nailed the ranch both times. I did it twice to reinforce the potential accuracy. And what was really interesting was after he did it all, and I said, what else are you feeling? Because remote viewing isn't just about geography. What else do you sense? And he says, there's a lot of activity going on underground, a lot of it. I see things in motions, machinery, beings of some kind, don't know exactly, but there's a lot going on. And this was in the meadow area, not under the mesa, the ridge line, the mesa. But it was in the meadow areas, And so I briefly thought for maybe 10 minutes on should I go do that, and I decided no, I'm not gonna really go and disturb that. Whatever it is, I'm going to leave it alone.
This rings true for you and your team, right? Things underground. I mean, you've been doing some digging. You've had some reactions to even little drill bits and things like that, and some kind of a response from whatever it is that's there.
Yeah, well, not only do we see the persistent signal that appears, the 1.6 gigahertz signal that seems to appear within the space when we are conducting some of these activities, but as we have probed the mesa and conducted what I kind of characterize as more of a medical biopsy of the ranch in that area, we've seen some disturbing things play out. I mean, we had our caretaker ended up having a cardiac episode simultaneous with drilling activity and the signal appearing, and had to be rushed off the property. We had to cease the activity. He was immediately evacuated by Dragon, my security, and taken to the hospital. And the attending physicians were very concerned. They asked, what caused this? What were you doing? And he was out at the homesteads. So he was in a different part of the property. He wasn't right there with the drilling activity. He was actually part of a separate group that was monitoring whether something would change in the environment on the other side of the ranch. Well, not only did something change, but we had an acute medical episode that still leaves us baffled.
Your caretaker had severe injuries as well. I mean, almost took his life because of an accident involving a horse, but you can't really pin it for sure on something unknown.
Gene Dietz was really our manager. Richard was kind of along for the ride. He was her husband. Nice guy, kind of a gnarly kind of guy, but he was a good horseman, and he had been out riding. And Gene noticed the horse came back to the corral without him on it. by itself, you know. So she drove out on the road and found his body, found him there laying down, and he wasn't dead. He had been seriously injured, and his eyes. Jean told me she said his eyes were changing color as she's talking to him, and he was mumbling something about others or other whatever it was that he had encountered, and so she concluded that the horse had really panicked and had drug him some kind of distance because his foot was still in the stirrup, or had been in the stirrup, I guess, of the horse, of the saddle, and seriously damaged his leg. And there may be other physical kinds of injuries he suffered. I'm not privy to exactly what they were, or much less the cause of them, but that's essentially the essence of what he. And then he went into a coma. He was taken to a hospital, I think, in Salt Lake. He went into a coma for about 4 weeks, a number of weeks, and the doctors were asking her if she would approve them taking him off of life support. And she called me. She said, "What should I do?" I said, "What do you have to lose by giving it some more time, giving him another 5 days or a week?" 3 days later, he comes out of it, and he was mentally just fine. He walked with a serious limp because he had such an injury to his leg, so he always had a cane with him, and then she was the manager though. But that's the story about Richard and the encounter.
You know, I remember meeting Richard the first time on the ranch, and we're sitting around under a tree and talking, and he said something that struck me. And one of the first visits, not my first one, but he said, "You know, I feel really good here." He says, "I can work from morning to into the night." He was old, you know. Well, I'm saying old now compared to me then, but you know, he dug it. He felt electrified by the ranch.
Whenever I was at that ranch,
Same
I
thing.
slept like a log.
Yeah.
I had no interferences whatsoever. I felt really, really good. And I never had a problem at all. And we had government people there. One night, Colin and I were with this lady, Jessica. I think we talked about her in one of the interviews, CIA gal. And boy, was she alive and worried one night. When we were out walking around, she was really super agitated. I'm just enjoying the evening. I think this is really great. And then that's the time that Colin, there were three of us, and he saw that animal. Very
the dino
unusual,
beaver.
Yeah, very unusual animal walking by. And but other people had all kinds of different reactions. I really slept great. I was energized. I thought, boy, this is a great place.
It seems like whatever is there responds to what you bring to the party. You know, I'm always trying to be respectful, get my head in the right place when I go there, and I'm just here to learn. And I have noticed it seems to be a trend that over the years, the badasses are the ones that have the most problems. People who are tough guys, they're strapping with guns, they're intelligent people, ex-military cops. I don't know. You find anything to that?
Yeah, a lot of, I mean, whatever is at play at Skinwalker Ranch has the ability to immediately scan someone's consciousness and immediately discern their intent, even read their mind. And that's why we caution everyone before entering that they need to prepare themselves spiritually. They need to enter with a spirit of humility and reverence, because whatever we're dealing with is 2 steps ahead of us and can already sense and understand your intent and react to it negatively if there is an adversarial spirit or intention. My people I've never had a negative experience when I've slept on the ranch, but we've had countless others that have refused to ever come back to the ranch.
Yeah.
It's unpredictable. You have some people that have the most terrifying nightmares when sleeping on the ranch and don't ever want to come back. And then you have others. I mean, as I recall, I mean, that my first months of owning the property, I couldn't get over how peaceful and beautiful the property was every time I visited. And I thought, gosh, it's only a matter of time before we verify that there really isn't anything unusual happening here, and that anything unusual can be actually attributed to some natural cause, either something within the geology, or maybe it's the product of groupthink. And
It was a small river running through it.
yeah, Dry Gulch Creek, that Dry Gulch Creek that cuts through the property, it is a pretty prominent feature.
Yeah.
And that's something that we actually investigated the last few years for the first time. We actually took instrumentation down there to probe the area, especially because of some of the history with, the Sherman's dogs retreating down that way. We had the reports of large wolf-like creatures that would actually exit, the area of the homesteads and go down toward the creek, and were never seen again. And of course, you know what happened when we went down to explore Dry Gulch Creek.
You found one.
We found the carcass, the decomposing carcass of an unusually large wolf-like creature. And the teeth, in particular, the jawbone, the teeth were very, very unusual. And we took samples, even though the guys were gagging. I mean, it was covered with maggots and decomposing there in the water right on the edge of the creek. Thank goodness. I mean, they had the presence of mind to take a sample, to cut off a piece of its jaw and to be able to bag it. They had Ziploc bags with them and put it in a protective bag to have it analyzed. And when we had our biologist, Ben Woodruff, analyze it, he was shocked to find out that the direct match, I mean, we're talking direct match to this jawbone, was an over 10,000-year-old extinct direwolf. And he was stunned. We were stunned. But what it did, George, is it actually added absolute validity to what many people believe to be fantastical accounts of large wolf-like creatures that were impervious to gunshots.
Yeah.
The history that you documented with the Shermans, a lot of people understandably have dismissed, and they felt like it was not only not credible, but that it just sounded like just tall tales. Well, to actually recover biology on that property that points toward it being true is one of the many, I think, validating and gratifying parts of our investigation. What did you think when you heard that? Did you hear about our recovery of that?
Yeah, it's a shame you couldn't get all of the teeth and make it a necklace. So,
I don't know that anyone would dare wear that necklace.
somebody would, for sure. I'm just kidding. No. I'm just kidding with you.
Well, let's talk about what it is that's there, or a they that's there. I remember my very first visit, Junior Hicks is there. He'd been chronicling strange activity in the basin for decades by that point.
Since 1950.
Yeah, and I'm looking up at the ridge, the mesa there, and I said, boy, that's really beautiful. And Junior Hicks says, yeah, that's the path of the Skinwalker. And I go, what? Skinwalker? What? I had never heard the name before. It became the title for a series of articles that I wrote in 2002, and then Colin and I used it in the book, and then, it's your term now, but I'd never heard of it. And I couldn't find any Native Americans when we're trying to write about it who were willing to talk about it. But the story about the curse that was put on the Utes by the Navajo, that was shared with me by Junior. And, I'm sure that us sharing that story, it seemed quaint to people who, oh gosh, superstitious Native lore. But that was kind of their umbrella term for a lot of weird stuff that they had seen on or around that property.
Well, we've had Native Americans corroborate that as well. So as we've gone out to the community to verify the truth of these accounts, and the history that you reported on that had been passed to you, it has been surprising to have so many witnesses and so many people corroborating that history.
You look at the history, and it's so many of the things that, well, we call them the Gormans, but which the ranch family had reported to you and reported to Colum and the team. It was almost humorous, mischievous, things moving around, the Gwen taking a shower and her towel and brush being gone and finding equipment in the refrigerator or a pile of wood being moved. It's almost like, playful and trying to get your attention and almost a form of communication. But then you had other stuff, creatures that show up that don't exist. The muscular hyena that attacked their horse, the dino beaver that Colum and others saw, animals that don't exist, Bigfoot type creatures, things in the house, and dark entities that scares the heck out of anyone who's there. I mean, at times playful, at times harmful, and a lot of times very mysterious. So going into it, and then now, Robert, after all these years, is it an it? Is it a they? Is it a dimensional crossroads where things bleed in from other realities? Is it all the same thing, just taking different forms? What do you think?
It's all the above, but you're not when you're engaging in an elementary type of communication, like setting up games or they're setting up things that are being acted upon, or they're playing games. You haven't established any rule parameters yet. So if you were to undertake serious communication that we talked about last night, you would set up a variety of different kinds of parameters, and probably some of that parameter would include who you want coming through. If you are opening up the door to another side of consciousness, more sophisticated than our dimension, you need to establish an effort. You need to make an effort as to with whom do you want to communicate. That's what I would do. I would set that up. I would try to try to have the right attitude about it entirely. Sincerity really, really means a lot. If you think you're gonna, if it's all telepathic, you don't know anything about the subject's ability to detect fraud in your behavior. If you're not sincere, you're going to be stopped. So I would sincerely do what I could to invent ways to try to communicate with whom I wanted to communicate. That was a peaceful entity, a spiritual even entity, not a malevolent one. And because they're there, not so different than human beings in a sense, right? With the emotional kind of characteristics. But so I would gravitate everything I could toward that kind of entity that I wanted to have a responsible dialogue with.
Sort of the same question for you, Brandon. You've been there a long time now, and so many different kinds of manifestations. I guess you can't, if the investigation's ongoing, you don't want to lock yourself into one position. You have flying saucers there. You think we equate that with ETs, right? But you have other kinds of phenomena that have nothing to do with what we think we know about aliens. So
it's non-human intelligence. I think the safest way to characterize what we're interacting with, in my view, is that it's non-human intelligence. It's far advanced. It has capabilities that no one can explain based on our current understanding of physics or technology platforms. And there's a diversity of phenomena that exists. It's not just unidentified aerial phenomena or cryptid creatures that are not easily identified. You have shadow figures, you have spectral images that have appeared to a number of people during my stewardship you were there with the international superstar
Robbie
Robbie
Williams,
Williams.
right.
And when George came out with Robbie Williams to document what was happening with the ranch under my stewardship at that time, I had no desire to ever reveal my identity as the owner, and I forced them to mask my voice and to mask my identity. But during that fateful visit, a number of things happened, and most notably at the end of that visit, as everyone was retiring for the night, Mr. Williams' private security professional, was watching everyone kind of get ready for bed and go back down the back hallway in the trailer in the command center, and saw an image, a figure, a dark figure come through the wall and follow back into the hallway right before his eyes. And this is, you remember that security professional expressed his skepticism
Coming into it.
when they came in. When he arrived, he told me, I don't believe in any of this paranormal stuff, but I'm here simply to protect Robbie Williams. Well, and you can corroborate this, when he saw that spectral image appear and follow down the back hallway, he gave you guys
Let's go.
5 minutes to pack up your things and to head to the airport and to make an exit. That's compelling. When you have a private security professional that is tasked with the health and safety of a high-profile global celebrity who expressed skepticism upon first entering the property, that ends up evacuating everyone because of his own witness of phenomena that he can't explain. I mean, that was pretty compelling.
Thank you for listening to the Bigelow Podcast. Part 2 of our discussion with Brandon Fugal will be available Tuesday, September 1st. If you have any interesting questions you'd like to see us address, please send us a letter to 1899 West Brooks Avenue, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89032, care of Bigelow Podcast. Thanks.